okay, what is your intention behind using these two today to get an advantage over your opponents?
Wondering if we see Poom's Mundo come out again, if they let Senna through this time around, as we got to see it yesterday. But I also want to give a tertiary kind of dive into this top lane matchup, because I do think that it's so interesting, because it's a little bit like a further progressed Will versus Kinvi matchup, right? You've got Tenacity, who's also in the same vein as Kinvi, where you're thriving in the academy scene. You've made it through the amateur. Like, you've been building up over this past time. And you have Lorlo down in academy, having experience in LCS, having a lot of experience across the board in League of Legends, and being a strong, stable top laner. You're going up against this guy. It can be very, I guess, daunting to a task, right?
Tenacity has really taken on the mantle of being like a weak side top laner for 100 Thieves. So rarely are we seeing him on like the hyper aggression that we recognized him for back when he like first started in and doing that crazy stuff, right? And like into Lorlo, that's a strategy that can work, that hyper aggression, and also the soft side can work, because Dignitas doesn't always necessarily put a bunch of resources into Lorlo either. So I suspect this lane could be either excruciatingly quiet, or they're both going to be very focused on team fighting. And I think that secondary point is the point that we're going to focus on more, because these two will go and they'll say, okay, we're going to play more for 5-on-5, more for TP flanks, things like that. We're not going to focus super heavily on this laning phase. It opens up for top laners potentially to make impact, to say, okay, we're gonna give cheat here for Tenacity, and say if you've got a weak lane, we can cut it, or if you got a powerful lane, then the other person doesn't get to play in the slightest. Maybe that's a possibility, but I'm expecting them to play a lot more for their teams in this one than anything else. But you're right, it's the level of play these two have shown is actually very impressive as well.
Yeah, it can't be talked about enough. But now that we're getting closer and closer to draft, right, I want to look ahead and look at what potential there is for these junglers, right? There's got to be a lot of priority on those aggressive style junglers, those junglers that want to be in the pressure, at least pushing the pressure forward and really having early advantages, so that the rest of the team is unlocked. So where do you really see the big priorities, at least early on in the draft, come through?
I think getting anything comfortable for Will has obviously made him look like a just completely different beast when it comes to Dignitas' gameplay. When you're looking at like Kindred and Rek'Sai as the two picks that like you literally look up Will on this op.gg, that's not his name, I'm not gonna give it out either, but like if you look up his account, he's Kindred and Rek'Sai are two of the biggest, and it's because it attacks the other jungler really well. And from there's still like Xin Zhao, which does similar things in that regard, and then the rest of it starts to like fall off. But you see the difference in performance when he's able to play this like attacking the other jungler style with like Kindred and Rek'Sai and Xin Zhao versus everything else that like fits together. Even Volibear, I think yesterday, started to fit into that mold of being able to control the map. Something like that for Will is the first step, I think, for Dignitas inside of this game. So getting something like that and getting support for it from his lanes, I think would be helpful for them. On the opposite side, Kenvi does a similar role, but in this case, instead of attacking the other jungler, he likes to attack lanes and he likes to attack other places.
Except obviously, for yesterday.
Yesterday on the Lee Sin, it was a little crazy. So you have to be careful if you're Will, because, I mean, if that strategy comes out, you're going to be in some dire straits.
If Will watches that game, he's like, oh my god, that was against contracts.
It was a tough one. It was hard to watch, at least a little bit. Lee Sin versus Diana wasn't exactly the most fun matchup there for Mr. Contracts early on. So if Will wants to lean into this super heavy I'm gonna beat you down style, he does have to be careful that Kenvi doesn't get the support from his lanes, or that like Kenvi doesn't have something more powerful, because we've seen Will, he does get invaded, he does get counterplayed a fair amount in some specific games that you could cite back in the day. And so if they're going to lean into that strategy, they have to make sure Kenvi doesn't have that counterplay. If they do go for that strategy, they got to make sure Kenvi doesn't have that impact that he usually has on champions like the Diana, or something that helps his team out in that regard.
Well, and that's what's so funny to me is like we can look at this jungle matchup. We've talked already how important it is, and where you're looking at those early skirmishers for both these guys, maybe different outsets and how they want to play these skirmishers, but you're still looking at those early aggressors, right? But then when you're looking at the other lanes, right, there's so many things that you can go. There's so many avenues forward for both these teams, and especially when you're looking at the individual lanes, right? There's a lot of flexibility right now, obviously, in the meta between these two lanes. But the fact of the matter is that both these players in these mid lanes on both these teams have a lot of champions under their belt, as well as the top laners for both these teams.
But they do. The wide variety of strategies capable of being taken by these teams specifically is it's pretty impressive, and it makes it difficult to make a read for either team. So to me, it's like, find the strategy that works for you. I think you pointed out well mid lane as well, where it's Saligo, who's got a lot of experience even in like the LCS, and then also on the other side, Ryoma's in the same way. These two are experienced. They have to understand that their junglers need the support of whatever they've got, and so mid lane matchups specifically, I think will be something to keep a track of at least during the drafting phase, especially for red side, because it's like you can take something to counterpick your opposing mid laner, and then all of a sudden, if Will's going aggressive, but you have counterpick on the other side, Ryoma can help out that matchup, and then the reverse is true if they draft in the opposite direction. So that's something to consider as well. Is, you know, what is your mid push going to look like, and how fast can these mid laners respond to aggressive play if one of these junglers goes for it? Because again, if that support was there for contracts yesterday, maybe they wouldn't have had 32 kills to begin the game.
Maybe, who knows? But the fact is, like, I'm very excited for these teams in particular matched up, because I think there is going to be a lot of that kind of skirmishing early on. There's going to be a lot of movement around the map, and potentially just a lot of fireworks at least. And if we can continue what we got to see yesterday on Summoner's Rift, I'm totally fine with it, because to give the chance for Will to come into a series like this against a hotly performing 100 Thieves Academy, like, I think that this is a big moment for him, right? And like, Dignitas Academy are committed, at least for now, to getting this player reps, to getting some experience for this young jungler, and to be able to make him rise through the ranks, just as, you know, the 100 Thieves Academy talent pool has done for so long now. But we are finally in the draft here. 100 Thieves Academy on the blue side, Dignitas Quantipe Academy on the red. We do have Renekton LeBlanc banned away by 100 Thieves Academy, so very, very heavy solo lane focus, especially towards that mid lane. And Gwen Viego, the immediate bans by Dignitas.
Wanted to take away as much of the pool as absolutely possible. Also, I'm getting rid of JJ's Thresh is something else, because again, Poom doesn't play too much of it, or hasn't touched it too much this split. Yesterday, the Aurelia really caught fire inside of Academy, and we saw a number of teams take it. We even saw like B1 in our first series a couple of times. But again, Xin Zhao's been given up, and you know Kenvy's going to go to that immediately. It fills both roles of he can aggress against Will now with it, and also on the flip half, you can play something like the Diana, where you can use it to aggress against lanes. It's a perfect duality here for the likes of Kenvy.
The spice is nice, especially when it's big and purple. Mundo coming in for Dignitas Academy. And we have Lee Sin as well there, so not too shabby on the first two pickups for them. And now as the response for 100 Thieves Academy, they've already gotten a very strong jungler, especially that early skirmishing we were asking for. Now do they go for these solo lanes? Do they try to pick something up bot lane? They do get the Lulu.
Yeah, Ryoma's like the token Lulu player right now, I think, inside of Academy after getting solo kill on that champion in the mid lane. It's kind of hard to doubt his abilities, and especially when you pair it with Xin Zhao, it's extremely powerful at that dueling, that play you're going to have. If they go to Karma 2, this is going to go absolutely crazy, because again, we've seen that before, but I'm not sold that the double enchant there's always perfect. I want to come back to Dig though, because again, Lee Sin and Mundo are interesting because they're champions that like they can fit into laning roles and also into jungle after this most recent patch. Mundo now can jungle a lot more effectively. We saw that used yesterday specifically. I'm curious if Will was able to pick up a champion that quickly to try to mitigate some of this dueling powers in Zhao's got.
Would be really interesting. I do like the Jace pickup though for 100 Thieves Academy, definitely indexing towards that top side of the map. And with the Aurelia banned away is the last ban, we didn't really focus on that, but we do get the Senna locked in for Dignitas. So they are taking some of 100 Thieves Academy's medicine, throwing it right back at them.
We've seen a handful of teams run this, and it seems like Dignitas has caught on as well, where they're running that Mundo Senna potentially in the bottom lane. That doesn't mean it's guaranteed, because we've seen Tom Kench come back at least a little bit as well. I bet JJ could have that one prepared as well. But the consideration's there that the Senna Tom Kench is going to be available. It's a tough lane to try to aggress against. You got a lot of range, a lot of poke to begin with. It's hard to stay really safe, and it's hard to get a bunch of priority on your bottom side here from the side of Luger and Boom. So there is that to consider, that at least bottom side should be something safe for the like of Dig Academy, and especially Will, to play towards now with this powerful combination.
So I will say maybe 100 Thieves Academy getting a little bait there when they were hovering the Cogmaw, making Dignitas remind themselves that, you know, you got to take this away. There's no, you know, you give over a free Cogmaw Lulu, it's a little scary when you get to the later parts of the game, and 100 Thieves Academy are definitely good at that one. We do get the Azir ban away by 100 Thieves though, as their first ban in the second phase.
Making sure to take away some of the DPS, because at the moment, like, you got Lee Sin, and then you got like double poke bot lane, and Senna's got some good like damage for the later game fights, but typically you want some more supplement to that DPS. So like Azir is the champion that comes out, and other champions that typically fill that role are a little lower down priorities. You're not going to ban like Cassiopeia or something like that. Rise might be something in the back pocket of Saligo. I know he played that even in his LCS days, so that's something to consider. That's popped up a number of times just this weekend or these last couple days alone. So there's that to consider, as well as you're seeing Dignitas. They're saying, okay, no safety, no range for you, no Ezreal for Luger, no Kog'Maw for Luger to pair alongside the likes of that Lulu. I'm assuming it's going to be Lulu mid lane. It could have gone down to Poom because he's played it once this split, but they're just not giving him anything safe to work with here. They're not letting them avoid this Mundo Senna combination.
We do see the Diana as the last ban from 100 Thieves Academy, so taking away the possibilities of that dive, early skirmisher jungler right now for Will. There's still some options on the board here, and we'll see what Dignitas want to really go and finally see where that flexibility that Dignitas have shown us already is going to actually pan out too, because I think that's super important for the way that 100 Thieves Academy is going to approach this second phase and pick up their last 2 picks here, because you've got to know kind of the approach that Dignitas are going for, and they lock in the Karma. So, we go from banning Lulu Karma every game to now we get both of them in one game.
Yeah, some of the power, I think, was realized to be a bit more perceptive. This patch is a little weaker as well after the nerfs and stuff to Shurelia's has really impacted it as well. So they've fallen down. Now you've got this Karma for the solo lane. We're not sure whether Lee Sin's going into solo or not, but what we do know is Will gets a preference pick. This would be an interesting one.
Oh,
and there it is. Yeah.
Oh, we get the Sivir Yuumi bot lane. I love it.
That's a really fun combination because you've got enough wave clear just built into Sivir to be able to keep back Mundo and the likes of like the Senna to prevent any like that poking from landing, sticking, and then like soft CCing you to death. And Yuumi has a relatively free lane. There's not a bunch of kill pressure down there, so they're just going to stick to laning. They're going to stick to clearing as much as they can, as much as possible. And then you have Sivir ultimate with Xin Zhao and Lulu to come into this composition to create like a death ball. And that means Saligo comes to his rise. They're going to stick that Lee Sin in the jungle and try to, as best as possible, just like focus down targets as they come running in.
That honestly, I love the approach from both these squads right now. I'm looking over and looking at the aggression coming out from 100 Thieves. Right, they're gonna have a go forward composition. There'd be a couple members that are strong. You got to kill people, and then on the other side, you have a lot of sustain. You have a lot of pick potential, but you also have a lot of spacing and team fights and things along those lines. So I really want to see how those early objectives pan out for both these teams, because the objective focus I do feel like will be important.
I'm curious now also because they ended up seeing the Sivir and the Yuumi in the bottom side. They shied away from the likes of the Senna and the Mundo on bottom side because they just don't have the wave clear to do anything. So now, double range bot lane, they can flip the script where they're like, okay, if you're going to shove us in every game, Senna can now take on the mantle of like Ezreal, or Karma can take on the mantle of Ezreal, and we can roam a bit more with the likes of Spawn or JJ. And with double range into the likes of the Sivir, they can challenge against the Yuumi's early game where like she is the weakest that she's going to be throughout the entirety of the game. So now like we went from a place where like Sivir Yuumi are just going to get to sit there and wait and play out the game in like the long term and wave clear and things, to now, I mean, Mundo's top lane soaking a Jace for the most part, poking him down with things like the Comet, and your bottom lane should have a bit more impact. They've put more into their lanes to help out Will, even though Will's matchup isn't perfect for him to begin with. I like that from Dignitas. They were really creative with the way they've been able to shift around their craft.
And on the screen right now, no, it is live. I was gonna say there's triple TP on the side of Dignitas, so I love to see it. I want to see what happens at bot lane though, because you do have a little bit more of an advantage for Luger and Poom in that aspect. Not going to be huge or anything, right? It's just those little tiny plays, those micro out plays that can potentially happen. But we are on to Summoner's Rift for our first game of the day. 100 Thieves Academy taking on Dignitas Quantum Pay Academy.
We do. I'm excited to see, of course, like, we don't get a lot of Sivir. And Luger, I know in solo queue, it popped up for a very long time, like the lethality Sivir, where you run, like, Duskblade and, like, Mono Moon, and then it's just, like, you're clearing waves over and over and over. And I like that we haven't gone to that kind of, like,
I've also seen the utility. I've also seen the utility Sivir where you get like Serpent's Fang and Shureldia's Grudge and like, all
stuff
that
like
kind
that.
of stuff.
Yeah, we're not having any of that because I think it's just going to be lethality Sivir today, thankfully. So we're not going to have nonsense in that regard. none of that lethality or anything. It's going to be likely like this standard like front to back type Sivir play, which we don't get a bunch of. But again, with the AD pool got pinched so far, they were assuming they had a matchup that was going to be low wave clear, that they were going to be able to sit in that lane for a while, so they were comfortable with it. And now they're playing into something a little bit different. So JJ Spawn should have a bit of a thought of, okay, we got to pick our matchup, so maybe we're comfortable with something like this into the likes of Sivir. But I'm curious to see what Luger can do with it, especially because you know him as like an aggressive ADC. We've some really crazy stuff when it comes to forward plays, and Sivir can get very aggressive with this move speed, setting up the rest of this team and forcing 100 Thieves to commit into fights. That's been some of their problem over the last few weeks.
And I just have to laud Dignitas here for the quick thinking right at the end to switch it up and get back to something that you feel more favorable in, at least. And at least having those kinds of moments against 100 Thieves, who is one of these top teams, right? Like, it feels good that you can find comfort in a game that might have been crazy, right? We are looking at the early pathing of these junglers, though. We highlighted them a lot when we were coming before the draft and into the draft as well with the pieces that they got. We got opposite side starts for both of them. A little bit opposite side pathing, but no craziness with skirmishing looking like it's going to happen anytime soon.
Not quite yet, yeah. We also see that like Will he decided to go, he went red Raptors and then immediately into Wolf's Grump so that he could reset the small camps before taking the blue. We do see from time to time what you'll do is you'll skip camps pretty like obscenely. We've seen as much as like Will went one camp into top side to gank for someone, and that did not go very well for him because he ended up dying to an invade to Andi, I believe it was, immediately afterwards. But clearly, like, that kind of thing can happen on Lee Sin. Will has done that kind of thing before, but this isn't going to be that kind of game. Instead, just sticks with his traditional pathing, goes for the 5 camp clear. Now going to end up on bottom side alongside Kenvi as well. I think Mr. Mazel actually just disconnected, so I don't think he's in right now as, okay. He might be able to come back. I'm not sure if he's here or not, but
I am right for the action, but it didn't happen, so it's fine. But actually, Will goes in for a little heavy trade there. Nice little bounce from Soligo as well. Is going to get some damage down and eventually look for Dignitas to move down towards bot lane. You already see pings coming through. I would be a little questionable to try to get this bot lane this early on. I feel like Yumi's server is pretty darn under tower. I think they want to go for it anyways, Rebel.
I don't think they're going to force too heavily. It's really easy for Will to just try to find. Oh, the TP is going to be committed. Never mind.
Yeah, they are heavily forcing after they call Soligo's TP, and there's a TP in response there from Ryoma. Nothing's going to come down just yet. Little tension in the air, though, Rebel. Little tension.
Bluff called right there from the side of Dignitas, where, again, I don't think they wanted to ever full commit to this one, and then they throw the TP, and they're like, okay, what can we get? Soligo did have an advantage, but lost a fair amount of the minions that were in that mid-wave because, of course, Zinzao and Kenvi was there to try to punish at least a little bit. And now it also allows, I think, oh, no, actually. So what happened was Will backed, and there's no back here from Kenvi. So Kenvi's going to take a little bit of a later reset, allow Will maybe potential here, especially with the wave bouncing back out for Rise to find some aggression into Renilna. Maybe that's an option here after you go from Drugs into the likes of Wolf Camp, or into the likes of Raptor Camp.
Yeah, and that early aggression is what we highlighted
maybe
the most
that's the case.
throughout.
Well, we'll see what he takes this pathing off immediately to come through. I know Tenacity
along the lines
versus Lorlo is going to be a difficult to manage as well.
As I do believe we were talking over each other for a moment, but I was making a point in the fact that like it is really important for them to get active early on. And it's interesting to see that Will is unable to find those early advantages on the Lee Sin. Still a lot of strength to come through, right? But like you want to find early and early pressure at least on the Lee Sin. As I do believe we're going to have a little bit of pause coming up, so you get to see our beautiful faces as we do have a pause going through on the Rift. Just a little issue. Well, I'm sure we'll get through it here pretty soon, but we can talk about the game so far and hope that my internet does not decide to skip again.
Yeah, it's a point now where there's actually about to be a topside rotation coming in. So like what we just saw where like Zinzao and Rise were moving, or my apologies, Lee Sin and Rise were coming in. I know you are always about Lee Sin wanting to make like super early plays and things of that sort. I know you are. We saw it yesterday from Kenvi. This is a case where it feels like it's fine also just to make sure that like the Zinzao is not going to have a chance to make a bunch of effects, because you do have Rise for late game scaling, you have Senna for late game scaling. Mundo becomes a wall that like even with a Sivir, like I'm trying to think like who it is else on this team that's going to be able to bust through that. Like I know Jace eventually has good damage, but I don't think it's easy to bring down Mundo, who's just this massive like wall, especially if you go into Anathemas and like attach it to Jace or Sivir. Then all of a sudden you have one really good damage source into like a 5,300 or 5,000 health, 300 armor tank in front. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to break through that easily. So I will say, when it comes to scaling, I'm comfortable with where Dignitas is at right now. And so while Lee Sin, you want to see Will like aggress early, I think just controlling Kenvy's ability to attack the game is something that they can do and rely on their later game eventually as well.
Yeah, and that's where I guess I wasn't necessarily meaning like early aggression where I just want to see Will fighting. I want to see him be able to control the jungle against Kenvy, because we've seen so many times that Kenvy is so good at keeping pace up or finding objectives, finding a pace on the map that's really, really good, especially early, right? And if you can kind of get in on that, if you can stop that, if you can stop that confidence from building on Kenvy's side, that's where I find teams do find success against them. And I thought that, you know, Will would be able to get that at least this early, but it's still very, very early. There's still a lot to be played through. We haven't even had the first blood yet, right? We still are waiting for the real action to kick off, even though we've had a lot of skirmishing back and forth, but it's still wanting to get the Lee Sin somewhere prominent on the map.
There's also, like, I will say that their first like initial play was actually kind of creative, only because since Ryze has a way to get around the map with level 6 with like the Realm Warp and Lulu does not, burning double TP, especially with Ryze having an advantage in terms of farm at that point in the game, catching additional, then being able to come back and not have much, then pushing out against the Lulu, it's like, that's a solid play to come through. I think that's a winning play for Dignitas, even though you get nothing tangible out of it because it's just a trade of summoner spells for the most part. Not having Lulu to have easier access against the Ryze to begin the game is also going to be really nice. So there's that as well, where like the Realm Warp is hopefully a tool that can be used to help support some of this one-on-one in the jungle or some of these side lane plays that you're looking for on the side of Dignitas as well.
Yeah, and I do believe we're going to be getting a game here shortly, but I still think that, you know, you were talking a little bit about the scaling aspect of it, and I am a huge fan of Senna in general. Maybe the playstyle maybe doesn't fit all together, you know, in the traditional hardcore ADC, but I feel like the support that you can bring with the kind of composition that Dignitas have brought, like, it gets so scary in the later games. So I would honestly personally like to see how the first objective comes through, right? We have a dragon on the board as we get to be back onto the Rift. It's very exciting in itself. But with the first dragon on the board, right, I want to see those first like 3v3s, 4v4s, see how these compositions are kind of stacking up together and see how the target acquisition is for both of them, because I think that's also something that's going to be very integral to a success in this game.
Man, I love our observers who just showed off that Ryze EQ just for the wave clear. It's a good way. It's a good transition here to talk about how like Lulu almost always had just like pure lane control. But again, if Saligo's able to access his wave, he can shove out. Like that's the thing about Ryze, is he's got decent wave clear to begin the game. It doesn't make it super easy for Ryoma, barring a couple of very aggressive trades, to really have a ton of control over top of the like early laning the way that like Karma does into most matchups. You know, it's a lot harder.
Oh, JJ! Going aggressive with the flash. He wanted to set up Will, but not going to be able to find it on bot lane. Saligo with a heavy trade. Wild Growth gets the knock up, and you gotta love Lulu gameplay.
We are worried about the fact that Ryoma, again, had a solo queue early, or a solo kill earlier on in the split on the likes of the Lulu, and Saligo not wanting to be the next one. So Ryoma putting that pressure on with this Enchanter mid lane to these opposing mid laners inside of Academy. You know how good Ryoma has been previously. And the thing is, like, Saligo actually holds his ground right there, which was really important, because if Ryoma breaks that, it's potential that Will can't necessarily walk into this pit, only because they do have information on where Xin Zhao was. So given that Saligo was able to keep his ground, keep that wave where it was, and not go down during that process, and not burn flash in general, all resources that are helpful to make sure that his jungler was able to solo down that dragon. So the lane's holding down so that Will is not going to feel too much pressure.
No.
Oh, no, he's good.
I thought he was going to go in on him. All right. I see. But Kenvy wanting to look bot lane while he has the whole bottom side of his jungle to clear. Going to go back through that. We do get Will's reset towards the top lane. I think it's really impressive that Dignitas are able to get the first objective of the game. Not going to be the 3v3s or the 4v4s, the 5v5s that I wanted, but I understand. It's okay. But the early objective is going to be nice for Dignitas. That's something I was focusing on earlier, right? I do think it's going to be important for both these teams. Oh, take a nice little trade. The tenacity up there. But I do want to see now that this Rift Herald is on the board, that we see a lot of presence of Dignitas up towards this top lane. Do they just go for that next objective?
They just might. They've got enough control across the board. Again, it's constantly like Saligo is not losing a bunch to the Lulu in terms of pressure, and when he wants to shove out, absolutely is capable of doing so. Here, Tenacity does read this. He's Mundo player. He understands the confines of that. Oh my god.
That was so close.
41 health. 41 health was the difference right there, as Will is able to steal off a little bit. It has been fantastic. I've loved this from Dignitas. Their draft looks really good in the later stages, and they're still able to help support Will in some of this early game endeavor to find even just minute advantages. Here's aggression into Kenvi, and he's got Lorlo support as well, so Kenvi can't even stay here too heavily until Tenacity comes down. Tenacity's just out roaming, so we might get a 2v2 here.
Oh, Kenvi wants it. The kick back, Kenvi. He got the crescent guard off beautifully, but the kick doesn't matter. First blood to Lorlo.
First blood to Lorlo, but what a play from Will. Not only the kick, but also to find a Q to escape from Tenacity's clutches right before the first blood's going to come through. Also opens up topside because Rioma's still shoved in. Man, Dignitas finding some really nice early aggression with the Lee Sin.
That's the stuff I want to see from a young jungler in Will. I love it. And that is the kind of play you have to have against a ruthless jungler such as Kenvi. Be able to have that moment and as well steal Ryoma's blue buff away from him. Just saying at the very beginning of that, as we're going to get a replay of this.
Yeah, this is Will, and again, like with Lorlo's coverage, he saw him kind of walking away right here, and then Will's able to find this flash kick to get him past Lorlo. I thought potentially Tenacity was going to be able to find this. Yeah, that Q immediately get him out of the way of Tenacity. Yeah, he was on
the
death's
guillotine
right
was
there.
Coming down, dude. Like, that's your head is like in the stakes right there.
Yes, and I think it's possible if Tenacity hits E there instead of Q, he might actually land that damage, knock him out of the Q, and then he's able to trade away 1 for 1. We've gotten to this point. We do. We're getting a couple of places. I also want to note, I'm not sure if this number is entirely correct. It's 177 farm on the Rise. This is kind of crazy.
Kind of nutty with it, man. Kind of nutty with
and
it.
We're at 11 minutes. You know, it means it's like 16 CS per minute, right? Like, there's no way.
The dude is insane, all right?
That's not even obscene. That's impossible. Like, you'd have to be farming 2 waves at once or that kind of thing.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Everything's
but we got to
fine.
get back into it because we got a dragon in a minute. We already see presence from Dignitas Ponte Academy down towards that bot lane. Now we're getting the Realm Warp in top lane. TP from Ryoma isn't going to save Tenacity. Oh, the wild growth, but it doesn't matter. Lorlo gets himself a second kill of the game.
Yeah, notice, if you will, how easy it is for Lorlo to just pick away at the health bar of Tenacity over the course of, like, these plays. And Saligo's been everywhere. Again, this rise into Lulu is not looking particularly favorable for the Lulu, as this rise has been able to control that wave state in the mid lane constantly. They haven't been able to really pair Kenvi with Ryoma either across any of these plays, so it's just, it's problems everywhere. It's difficulty, I think, for Ryoma to be able to put on anything that this Lulu would like, where you want to use this wild growth, these E's alongside this early aggressive jungler to find plays, but really Kenvi just has not been able to have that impact.
Yeah, I mean, he's sitting at 2-1-2, right? He's probably had the most impact on the team, but it's still not enough to really put yourself in a position where this composition works itself out until you get later on, until you get into those 5v5s, right? Because this is a composition where you need to be centered on the Xin Zhao, where the plays are happening and when they're happening, and it just hasn't been able to work out for Honor Thieves because Dignitas have been so quick about the plays they want to make.
It is. You're seeing the Dignitas again. They put a bunch of this resource into this jungle position. It's paying off for them pretty well because they've been able to play into bot lane a couple of times, been able to play into neutral objectives, controlling pretty much everything at this point. It's been really nice to watch that Dignitas are leaning heavily into it. They're putting a lot of faith in their young jungler, right? Things like that have come through to be able to watch. So it's a lot of faith you're putting into Will. I know Spawn has also absorbed a fair amount of that faith to be able to carry in the later stages. That's why they put him on things like this. As into the bot lane goes Will again.
yeah, you gotta have a little bit of aggression as you're going under the tier 2 tower over here. Rift Herald coming down. Ooh, final chapter gonna be used. Flash by Spawn. Not too shabby to get that one, as they're gonna get this tower potentially. No, it's actually gonna be very, very close. But no, it's not at all, because Shelly doesn't get anything.
Nope, able to be canceled. Well covered by Kenby right here to make sure that this is gonna happen. Luger and Boom also just kind of keeping them away so they can't really support the Rift Herald on the charge in means that they can deny at least a little bit of resource that has come out from Dignitas. It's a nice little counterplay coming out from Kenby to be able to make things worse. So nice play. Again, I'm waiting for the entrance of Kenby into the game because he's 0-1-0 after getting played on earlier on into the confines of the game, was able to get picked off in that kind of very, very close 2v2 that they had. But when you do pair it with Lulu inside of a team fight, especially if you can get Luger involved and have that ultimate to death ball, it reminds me of like older Olaf, the way that Xin Zhao can also just jump in with just a bunch of support and do a bunch of damage. And that's what I think we're waiting here for from Kenby, as he's biding his time, picking his moment properly. This is something we wanted to see, I think, yesterday against the likes of EG, where EG had some advantages during the course of the game, and 100 Thieves had trouble finding the proper moments to find strikes on different portions of the map. And so what I'd like to see from Kenby is him finding these moments to get something back on the map, even though Dignitas is running things for the most part, at least at this moment.
Yeah, and I really like the Divine Thunder spike for Kenby on the Xin Zhao here, especially. And the thing is, though, for me, is like there's not an open space to really feel comfortable attacking right now. You've gotten to a point where like Soligo is super far ahead of Ryoma. You've got a lot of strength coming from this Rise. You've got a lot of maneuverability around the map from this Rise, as well as the triple TPs across from Dignitas. So there's a response every time you try to find an avenue for Kenby.
And they're running down this bottom tower as fast as possible. Spawn's able to get it. I am also really terrified for Tenacity in this one, because while Jace can scale and Tenacity's a pretty good Jace player, you're looking at his junk drawer of items with a Tear, a Cull, an Executioner's, a Longsword, and a Hammer up against a full Anathemas, which is going to make it so difficult. Again, there's no like percentage health on the likes of that Jace. There's double TP coming into bottom lane here. Find aggression.
Oh, there's a lot of damage on the Spawn. Spawn's already gone. Didn't have that flash to have an escape. Kenby goes in, still alive. Has so much healing from the Yuumi and from Ryoma, who has gotten down to the bot lane, and 100 Thieves have found the redemption play.
I am always so just floored by how much damage Xin Zhao can bring to a fight at any point in the game. It's insane. It's like even into the later stages, he doesn't fall off as hard as like other champions might, where like Olaf's damage sometimes falls off and can't quite do as much. And right there's a great example of, okay, they find this strike, even with the double TP, they were able to completely break open this bottom lane and use this Xin Zhao to the fullest extent. And it's off the back of Luger. Again, you're able to use this Sivir ultimate to put this Xin Zhao in proper position alongside this Yuumi. They're able to cut off Spawn from everybody, and they went one by one. First was Spawn, then they were able to turn on to the right targets. That Crescent Strike kept everybody out, so Ligo had to walk into the circle. And then the ultimate coming out from Lulu was what really saved everything, because the knock-up was able to save a bit more. And because of this, again, using this early power of the Xin Zhao finally gets 100 Thieves their first strike on the board, after, like you said, finding this like strike of the strength of what is the Divine Sunder and everything else coming to fruition. Finally, it's 100 Thieves getting themselves the first advantage they found.
I absolutely love the comeback, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it once. I get one free pass. The tenacity that 100 Thieves Academy are showing here in this game, because we set out how they want to play, how they should play, where they should look, right? Getting Kenby up, who can prop up their junglers more on a pedestal here. And 100 Thieves executed their composition very nicely on the bottom lane in a decisive play that turned the pace of the game, right? They're still in a deficit, but now Dignitas not as confident moving up in the lane, not as confident pressing up as much as they have been.
And it's also really difficult to try to kite backwards with anything but Karma ult E here to set up, only because now you've got not only Sivir ultimate, but you also have the Shurelias on the likes of your Lulu to put alongside Kenby. So the double enchanter with the likes of like the Moonstone on your Yuumi, who's able to do like quite a bit of damage and have like a bunch of support for the likes of Xin Zhao as well. It's so much supporting power for Kenby to just jump wildly into fights. I think the only one who can really soak that kind of damage at this point is going to be Lorlo. But then, of course, you have like Kraken Slayer Sivir, who's going to be putting in damage. You do have Tenacity starting to get into some of the damage items, and there's still plenty to consider on those two members as well, that you can't just put 100% of your effort into the likes of this Xin Zhao that is going to be doing quite a bit of damage.
Final chapter going in, a lot of healing and a lot of shielding on Kenvi. He's still at 3/4 health, and Lorlo's dead. Your tank, your frontliner, he might not be late game Mundo, but he's still strong, and he goes down like a paperweight here, and that's gonna be a dragon secured by 100 Thieves Academy.
Yeah, Kenvi, they found this patience that had come out of, like, well, it seems like nowhere, because I know 100 Thieves, they do like to fight really consistently. They waited for this right moment and this proper spike to come through for Kenvi, and now they're just applying it again and again and again, right there, getting the dragon off the back of that fight, where, like, there were 5 members, and Kenvi was pretty much the only one standing there. Of course, he had Boom on him, but everyone else was still a little further back. Ryoma couldn't even really press the ultimate to accomplish much. They actually might find Ryoma.
They definitely do here. A little bit of kick, a little bit of suave, and Will gets himself a kill.
Yeah, able to find at least a little bit. They catch out the Lulu rotating here to the top lane, trying to catch this wave as fast as possible, which is a nice little response. But this whole time, also, like, beyond just the plays that have come through for Kenvi, you've also bought a bare amount of breathing room here for Tenacity, which is quite nice. Because again, when the Jace starts to scale up, it's another damage put that you can add on to the likes of Kenvi and Luger, who are going to be there for him.
See, Dignitas' eyes are set on the second Rift Herald of the game. Hopefully this one will get a charge off. The original quality of the second Rift Herald.
Oh, yes.
The question is, where do you use it? You got some side lane towers, which, by the way, are worth a little bit more gold right now. Just saying. But we do want to see where Dignitas are striking next, where 100 Thieves are kind of moving their pieces, because as we've seen, we want 100 Thieves to really be grouped up. They want to find at least the trio, right? You want to have Boom, you want to have Ryoma on Kenvi. That's the only checkbox you've got to have. But you've also got to make sure you're set up for these next moments, right? You've got a little bit until an objective comes up. Yeah, Baron's on the board, but are we really in a position that can be taken out at any moment?
I think also your information that you've got is going to be really easy for Dignitas to try to play around if they've got that information. Busting down mid tower, even though it's really weak right now, would allow you to move up this ward line, and then it's like you don't have like an Ornn to throw an ultimate from a fair like distance away for the likes of 100 Thieves. You don't have anything like that. What you've got is run really fast, man, with the Xin Zhao, with like the all the support behind him, with like the Shirelias and like the Sivir as well, to try to get him into a fight really fast. But if you see him coming from a mile away, you can set up your like lines so that you've got like Lorlo in the front so that an NHL engagement doesn't do as much. You can have Will position so that you can try to fight a strike in the back line. Things like that. You can reorder your positioning so that not only can you like run away if needed, but you could actually like end up taking an advantageous fight, because you know like Kenvi's just going to be leading. He is the spear to the rest of this attack that the rest of this team is trying to support on their way in. If you can catch him on a ward or something, walking into a pitch, walking in to try to contest objectives, that's going to be the ideal. So right here, Dignitas, I think they need to find a way to break down mid tower as fast as possible. That's already weakened, but they have to make sure that 100 Thieves doesn't absorb the second Rift Herald in a row.
Yeah, on the hunt going to be used by Luger there, and they're just prepping up this middle lane for some aggression into the enemy jungle. And as you were saying, you know, wanting to see kind of how this little 22-minute 7-kill game is going to work out, where we've seen a passive but steady lead developed by Saligo on this Ryze. And Ryze is one of those characters that's just so darn spoopy when you get to the later parts and you get that scaling activated. Yes, he's still sitting on like 1.5 items or so, just about to finish the second, but you've still got to be careful, because both these teams are going to be very, very stout when we get into these later game team fights.
I will say this is perhaps the advantage that Sivir is going to bring in a fight, only because what's going to happen is eventually how these fights are going to break out is that you're going to have Frontline, who's going to be fighting directly into Kenvi, and Kenvi's going to absorb a fair amount with Pressing Guard, and this means either Saligo has to step up in a fight in order to throw auto attacks, Qs, things like that, to bust down Saligo or Kenvi, who's going to be on the front line, or you have to step back and wait for the Crescent Guard to go down, and either way, Luger is going to be able to put in damage with like the Ws that are coming out from the likes of the Sivir. So eventually the Sivir's damage is going to apply a lot easier than what Ryze is going to be able to do, because Kenvi can buy that Crescent Guard. That ultimate from Kenvi will stall out a good amount of the damage from the likes of Spawn and Saligo in the later stages, and that's something that has to really be taken advantage of, because not only is this like really difficult for Dignitas to deal with, but also making sure that Crescent Guard is used properly in a fight from Kenvi is what's going to buy them a bunch of the initial engagement fight win that is going to be brought by the likes of the Sivir and the Kenvi, and that's going to help Tenacity try to close out fights and things like that. So that Crescent Guard is the cooldown to keep your eye on, because everybody's going to be under effect, and Saligo is going to be one of the hardest ones, because like you said, that Rise scaling is so hard to access if you can't throw spells at the one person in the front, where you can start getting like the flux bounces and everything going.
Yeah, it kind of takes away a core piece of the mechanic there for Saligo. But we do have just a little bit longer till this dragon spawns, about 20 seconds on the board, and looks like both teams focusing more so towards this top side of the map just to ensure some vision down there, at least for Dignitas Quantum Pay. And they're on, this would be sole point, right, for Dignitas. I think that would be big in terms of pressure around the map and how they can choose to play the rest of the game out. But they're choosing to let 100 Thieves go ahead and take this dragon and focus more towards the top side. There are pings onto the Baron right now, but it's only Will up there.
It's interesting because I know Dignitas' scaling is something that they can rely on. Maybe they're trying to spike their gold far enough ahead to where Mundo all of a sudden is going to be impossible to break through for most of this team, especially if you can get like challenges from Lee Sin into the likes of Sivir to begin, only because the support's likely going to go to Xin Zhao before anybody else rather than going towards the Sivir in the later stages, only because Kenvi is your initiator and needs those resources to stay alive and allow space for your front line. This has been pretty interesting as they're just like contesting mid lane. Yeah, this was like a Baron call that Dignitas had. They couldn't quite finish it, and then as soon as they got pushed off, 100 Thieves was like, okay, we go to mid tower, and they just lose a mid tower for that.
Yeah, Will was pinging it for the longest time, but it didn't seem like maybe the communication was all the way there. But still, it's 100 Thieves being able to pick up an objective on the map because of it, and that's some of the quick movements, the decisiveness that we love to see from 100 Thieves.
Now, allow me to pontificate, only because like if you've got like a Zir and like Jinx, maybe that works for the side of Will, because it's not a bad call, because if you're trying to pressure them after they had taken Dragon, maybe it does, but this is not the fastest Spirit taking team in the world.
Wait,
so.
Are they just gonna fight over this blue? Okay, Kenvi just goes forward with it. See if he can get Will. Kick comes out. All right, and Will gets away.
All right, so it ends up being nothing accomplished for Dignitas right there, only getting, actually didn't even get a summoner spell out. They got pretty much nothing right there, only trying to trade the blue. We've seen interactions, but not too much over the last like 10 minutes of this game as these two teams have kind of calmed down.
Oh,
I think both of them are okay with this.
I think Tenacity's in some trouble here. Okay, TP is coming down from Ryoma.
Gracious.
Now Dawning Shadow across, and the Wild Growth to save the day yet again. Ryoma comes in clutch.
You know, Senna, like, you're ruining the 1v1s. I'm not okay with this. Every single time I watch these broadcasts, we're seeing like,
I just see Tenacity flash at the very beginning of that fight, and I'm like, oh god. What's about to happen right now?
Your best disengage option is your E, and that's the only CC he's got. So that canister drop from the passive on Mundo makes it so hard to stay away, especially with like the cleavers and everything perma slowing and making sure. Tenacity basically has to out DPS his way out of a fight like that, as right there. Thankfully, with that ward, able to spot Kenvi, because that could have been really dangerous in the wrong instances. I do wonder if at some point the wave clear becomes a problem, because again, when 2-3 item Sivir starts to come online, waves are just going to be perma-shoved. It's a lot like Ziggs in that regard, where it's like you're never going to have the ability to push waves out very far, because Luger's going to have so much wave clear to work with. Nobody else does, but you're at least going to be able to keep one lane as pushed out as you want here for the side of 100 Thieves, and their response to that is Rise. So it's like usually Rise is going to be hanging in a side lane more than competing against Sivir. So how does Dignitas like transfer what would be a side lane wave push into pressure into the map, trying to find some of the shallow warding? It's going to make for some very interesting kind of defensive setups where like you can hang towards a side lane around Baron or Dragon, and then you know where they're going to be coming from 100 Thieves, where it's likely going to be out of mid lane, wherever that Sivir was ending up pushing that wave from.
Yeah, so we got, looking at bot lane right now, we got both side laners down in bot lane pushing that one. They both have TP available, but nobody's going to go ahead and commit to that top lane, where they're just going to let Tenacity take down that tower. And 100 Thieves Academy are moving up towards the top side of the map, while a lot of Dignitas are still down, floating towards the bottom side.
Okay. They bailed on the Baron. I thought maybe they were just going to hard commit immediately and go towards the Baron and just like force them
there's
to move.
TPs. You gotta be careful.
There's TPs, but like, I mean, like your trade-off is like bottom tower, which is already kind of going down, and they're not going to be able to do anything with. And you're trading
a second tower up there.
Yeah, Tenacity's trading equally with Lorlo, because Lorlo did not have a wave here for a little bit. So again, I think a Baron force right there would have honestly won them a ridiculous amount across the map. 100 Thieves not willing to call that. Instead, they're like, hey, we'll take 2 towers worth of gold for our Jace in exchange for 1 tower's worth of gold for your Mundo and just catch mid wave. They're okay waiting for their scaling.
They're doing it right now. Look at the Baron.
Oh yeah.
It's a little bit later, but they are committing right now. And it's about quarter down as about half health coming over. Dignitas now want to potentially fight over this because don't necessarily want to give over that momentum to 100 Thieves. Lorlo is first in. They've got all 5 members here. Can they set it up? 100 Thieves are the machine that wants to move forward, and Kenby is the cog. Can they find the first kill? The kick comes out. Will in some trouble. The Dawning Shadow comes out. The resurgence from Dignitas as they're flashing forward. They've already got tenacity. Kenby is the target here. He goes golden, but now the back line is exposed, and Luger is back there still trying to make some work happen, but he's all alone. And Ryoma is left with the other support in Poom, while they are the only ones left for 100 Thieves.
We talk about what the scaling could look like, and we talk about how this initial engagement is everything to 100 Thieves. And I love that they're trying to set it up with a Baron push, because this allows for the turn immediately with a Yuumi, with the Shurelias, with the Xin Zhao. He gets pretty far ahead, but I think Tenacity and Luger are there for damage. But Dignitas, they understand this initial engagement is so important. Once the Crescent Guard's down, once that ability's waited out, there is nothing to soak damage on that front line from the side of 100 Thieves. So they just turn immediately. Warlow leads that charge in the midst of that fight, and it opens up so much, because it's not only a fight win and it's a 4,000 gold lead with a Baron buff to shove, but also even a Dragon here to get themselves onto Soul Point after bleeding the last 2 away to the side of 100 Thieves. Great call and a great defensive little team fight setup there.
And if only 100 Thieves had done this a little bit earlier, things would be a little bit different. But they go for the late Baron. They go for the turn of the fight. As you said, the initial engagement comes out. They wait out the Crescent Guard. They know they can go back in. Will even dashes out, but Lorlo is right there to sound the horn and move the team forward. The flash from Saligo is the haymaker in this fight.
The biggest thing I think during that fight is, number one, look at the health bars with some of the backliners where like Dignitas was able to trade people in and out really well, but also the initial part of the fight was saved by JJ specifically, who popped that ult E on Karma. That Mantra E gave so much speed and shielding off the initial engagement. They were able to retreat and then re-engage with Lorla. Will almost going down, I think, might have been a problem in this fight, but thankfully, like you said, he was able to get out of dodge fast enough to make sure that that wasn't going to be an impact. So a bunch of people inside of these fights making a bunch of impacts, but notice that it's Lorlo and JJ whose names come up first as being 2 of the most veteran members of this squad who understand what 100 Thieves are trying to do and are able to counteract.
And that's what I guess my biggest problem with this situation here for 100 Thieves is, like, it's so rough because your idea, your game plan is clearly on view for everybody to see, right? And if it doesn't get ahead, it's so hard to deal with when you have so many tools available at your disposal inside Dignitas. You can carry through multiple positions. You've got multiple scaling options. You've got all these kinds of things. And Saligo, out of things, is going to be knocked away from his Realm Warp and taken out by Envy. What happens afterwards? So Kenby's in trouble. They're all just kind of running for the hills right now. Ryoma's dead, Kenby's dead, and Dignitas have respawned with 2 of their own.
You use your initial engagement just trying to make sure you can bring down Saligo, which does work, but then you don't realize that everybody else is going to be showing up. Now Tenacity's kind of in a tough position where he's trying to outplay Will as best he can.
Just wanted to buy more time.
Yeah. Which minutes. He does. I mean, he buys a little more time. He's not gonna buy 5 minutes with it now, but he's gonna buy time, I think, for Sivert.
It has to be worth the splash, all right?
I mean, maybe. I mean, they were able to buy enough time to force this push off so you don't have every member here ready to allow Sivert the option to come back and maybe make a base defense with, like, the wave clear. I don't know this is a kill shot for Dignitas because, again, you have 5-10 seconds here on Kenby and on Ryoma. We're able to make things work. So, yeah, you should be fine. It should be fine here. Maybe that was worth it from the side of Tenacity.
Maybe it was worth it. We'll see in the end if they can take the dub here. But right now, it's a 6,000 gold lead for Dignitas Quantum Pay Academy. They're up to Soul Point as the next dragon spawns in about 2.5 minutes. They're going to get resets. They're going to be back on the map. They're going to have their renewed item spikes. You got to feel the confidence is key in this one. Dignitas do not want to take the pedal, or take the foot off the pedal, rather.
You do not. This is that initial play from earlier, and again, the force here from 100 Thieves, trying to find the side lane plays.
fly, bro.
Yeah, it was a nice little E actually canceling that Realm Warp to come through, but then again, Dignitas already had pressure on bottom side. Notice also, if you will, Sivir's in mid lane, making sure that's going to be shoved out constantly, which is what allows, they know, like, basically either Yuumi has to be attached to Sivir, or Yuumi has to be somewhere else. In either way, most of the time, it's not going to account enough for a full champion, so they just have an outnumber pretty much anywhere on the map as long as they've got 4 members and they know Sivir's somewhere. So that's like a big problem. And yes, Tenacity flashed. He burnt 2 of them here, where like Will and JJ just were not around, and you don't know that, Senna's not exactly the greatest turn taker of all time. So that extra DPS could have made the difference. They did get the inhibitor piece, though.
They did.
It doesn't matter.
They were able to get that one. Now the focus goes into mid and bot lane as they are pushing. You still got Tenacity trying to make something happen in top. You're going to continue to push up there. Does have TP just in case the emergency button is hit from his squad mates, but they're going to continue to press up here.
This is really rough. You've gotten to 3-item territory now on Sivir, but again, I don't know that even with this item setup that you can actually burn through this Mundo. Look how much health and armor that's held just within Lorlo's inventory. You also have no significant magic damage, so you didn't force him to build any of that either. He can just index fully into health armor, which is going to be really hard to rip through when you don't have percentage health or something. If this is like Kog'Maw, this just rips through, and that's potential for them to actually have Lorlo on different itemization. But yeah, like you said, it's why they banned it. It's why you can't give it over, that kind of thing to come through. And it opens up this Mundo to be far more effective. You think about, okay, Mundo goes where he pleases. In this game, I think right now, Mundo literally goes where he pleases. I don't know that Lorlo actually has somebody who can bring him down fast enough inside these fights, barring just like a really good engagement.
Be careful. You saw 100 Thieves right there. Were almost willing to take that fight. They wanted to get Kenvi forward. They have all the setup right. They were just lacking Luger, but now Luger is here, has on the hunt available. Lorlo getting a nice little engage on Kenvi. Kenvi takes that as his idea to go in, as he takes a decent amount of damage on the side of Lorlo. They want to move into the Dragon Pit here. This is Soul for Dignitas. Do they want to fight over this? That's the question. Now on the hunt to use. They're back on the back line. Will gets a beautiful kick, but then you have Tenacity as well. The health bar is a little bit low for 100 Thieves, and Dignitas are streaming as Kenvi is split from the rest of his team. Ryoma might get taken out by Will eventually here. Will can't decide. Will takes out Ryoma. A double kill for Lorlo. They're TPing for the end.
Notice, if you will, like, there's just nothing to break through this entire line of Dignitas, and they are able to find not 1 but 2 proper engagements, split up the whole team fight of 100 Thieves, and I think this is just going to be the game right here. They've got more members, they've got more than enough damage, they've got a minion wave here. This is Dignitas playing out early support for their jungler, good scaling, able to operate on all of it, fantastic team fight around that Baron buff, and they're going to bring down our 3rd-ranked team right here.
This is the stuff that Academy is made of. We get a couple more kills to come down. Pad those KDAs, buddies, because you just took down the 2nd place team in Academy.
3rd place now. Team Liquid surpassed.
Well, 3rd place now, technically, yes. But hey, when they were going for the game, it was 2nd place tied at least. So, we give them that one, all right? Give them that one. But what a heck of a game from Dignitas. There were some moments where the fight back was real from 100 Thieves. You saw the strength that 100 Thieves typically can bring through games, but it was Dignitas shutting them down at every corner. I'm just going to highlight that triple TP on the side of Dignitas, the fact that they were everywhere on the map, and every time that 100 Thieves tried to answer with something, there was a response.
The early play from Dignitas was really inspired. I love that they played to their early jungle. I love that they were able to execute on a number of different plays to not only shut out 100 Thieves, but also to find themselves some advantage. And I like that rather than really heavily trying to force that advantage and force it forward against the team that's got counterplay with Xin Zhao and things like that in the mid game, instead they sat, they waited. They knew that they had scaling on their side. They were willing to give up some of those mid-game dragons to find the proper team fight. And when it was time to actually play that out and they were able to get the right fight around that Baron buff, they flipped this game right back into their favor completely. 100 Thieves, they had a bit of fight inside of them, but it felt like Dignitas knew exactly what they needed to do all game long.
So for me, it was those like really hesitant engages, right? For this composition for 100 Thieves, you have the Xin Zhao, everybody else is trying to push you forward. Like, you have to be very direct in the engages, and there were a lot of those fights where Dignitas was playing so off that like it was really hard for Kenvi to go in or find those engagements without just fully throwing everything there and just giving up his life or finding those full-on engagements. So I think Dignitas played those fights really well. And for me, what I want to see going into game 2 is I want to see Ryoma on a playmaker.
I suppose you don't consider Lulu like Wild Gross playmaking enough for the likes of Ryoma. In that regard,
no comment. All right, no comment.
No comment. Yeah, okay. I suppose that would be like a cure for what ails you, and the ability for Ryoma to take over a little bit of the game. I think there's more to it than that. I do think
so
more
too.
damage could have been helpful. I think
play by play, smooth brain. Come on.
I think also, like, again, it's another one of those games where like the only aggression that 100 Thieves was able to really manifest was out of the jungle position, and I would really like to see one of their lanes start to explode to begin with. Because again, if you're ahead by like a kill or two on tenacity, the damage starts to look different. Like if Sivir is really ahead, you start to see different. I would like to see them use one of these lanes as a weapon as well, potentially, rather than just relying on Kenvi to do a bunch of the heavy lifting early on and then relying on team fighting later. It could give them a lot different of a look to begin with and help them in some of these fights to have more damage to work with, so you're not just completely reliant on that engage.
Thank you for taking my very simple thought and fleshing it out to what we actually wanted to say. Thank you so much, Rebel. We're going to step away. We're going to take a little break while we get ready for game number 2, though. Do not go anywhere.